Have you ever noticed that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one who holds real power? You've seen it. People who talk endlessly, begging for attention, while the quiet ones seem to pull strings without lifting a finger. And in your own life, you felt how silence can be more unsettling than anger, more commanding than threats. That's because silence itself can be a weapon. Machiavelli revealed this cold, calculated truth. Sometimes the deadliest move is to say nothing at all. He said nothing, and yet the room obeyed. Machiavelli knew the paradox that terrifies the weak and empowers the ruthless. Silence often strikes deeper than speech. A word can be contested. A speech can be mocked. But silence is a mirror that forces the other to reveal themselves. In politics, silence isn't absence. It's pressure. It is the pause before a blade. It is the shadow cast over an opponent until they crack under the weight of their own imagination. Most people talk to prove they exist. They justify, explain, protest, apologize. But Machiavelli understood. The more you speak, the more ammunition you hand away. The more you explain, the more your weakness shows. Power thrives in restraint. Because silence is not passive, it is calculated withholding. Think of a court, thick with rumor. One prince defends himself against every whisper, scrambling to prove his innocence. The other prince remains silent, eyes steady, voice absent. Who looks guilty? Who looks powerful? The one who begs to be believed has already lost. The one who withholds lets others choke on their doubt. And this is where it flips. Silence is not retreat. Silence is dominance disguised as withdrawal. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Fear is born not from endless noise, but from uncertainty. A ruler who answers every insult becomes predictable. A ruler who withholds creates a vacuum, and into that vacuum pours dread. Most misunderstand silence. They confuse it with weakness, shyness, indecision. They believe speaking louder means owning the room. But the coldest power move is the opposite. It is to withhold when everyone else spills. It is to pause when the crowd is addicted to speed. It is to let your opponent rush forward into their own mistake. Because silence weaponizes time. Every second you refuse to react, your rival grows more desperate for your reaction. The enemy imagines your thoughts. They replay their own words. They wonder what you know that they do not. Machiavelli would say, let them wonder. That wondering is the leash around their neck. This is not theory. This is battlefield strategy. Think of Cesare Borgia, the ruthless model for the prince. He was known for his sudden silences. He would receive ambassadors, let them speak endlessly, then dismiss them with no reply. They left the court trembling, unsure whether their words had pleased or doomed them. Silence was his verdict. His quiet was their sentence. Machiavelli, who observed Borgia closely, noted how silence became more terrifying than threats. A threat can be measured. Silence cannot. And what cannot be measured multiplies into fear. That is why silence is cold. It does not offer warmth, not even the warmth of anger. It leaves the other alone with themselves, and most people are terrified of themselves. In modern terms, you see this every day. The boss who never answers emails immediately. The negotiator who pauses 5 full seconds before speaking. The lover who responds not with paragraphs, but with quiet. Each time, the silent figure holds the frame. Each time, the other adjusts their behavior around the one who withholds. This is the secret. The world bends not to noise, but to gravity. Silence is gravity. It is the cold center around which others orbit. But here's what they don't expect. Silence requires preparation. You cannot simply withhold words if your life is weak. You cannot remain calm if you are secretly frantic. Silence without strength is collapse. Silence with strength is command. Machiavelli warned rulers, never appear weak. If you are silent, you must radiate the aura that says, I could speak. I simply choose not to. The unspoken must feel heavier than any speech could. That is why silence is strategy, not accident. It is trained, practiced, engineered. The cold ruler masters the art of the pause. The cold ruler cultivates a face that does not flinch. The cold ruler builds a life where silence cannot be mistaken for emptiness. Silence is filled with presence, with subtle signs of control. This is why Machiavelli's law bites so deep. Silence without substance exposes you. Silence with substance elevates you. And here is the brutal twist. Silence is not merely about controlling others. It is about controlling yourself. Most people cannot tolerate silence because they cannot tolerate themselves. In the quiet, their thoughts scream. Their insecurities leak. Their need for validation closet them. That is why they rush to speak, to text, to fill every pause. They are not controlling others, they are fleeing themselves. The prince who commands silence has conquered the most dangerous enemy, his own need to be liked, his own craving for recognition, his own addiction to sound. This is why silence is freedom, and freedom is power. But Machiavelli's silence was never passive. It was never the silence of retreat. It was the silence of command. Picture the Florentine court. Alliances form, dissolve, reform. One faction whispers that the Duke will strike tomorrow. Another swears he has no intention of moving. The Duke himself? He says nothing. His stillness stretches across the chamber like a shadow. Ministers panic. Ambassadors write frantic letters. Soldiers sharpen their blades just in case. And Machiavelli smiles, because silence is not the absence of strategy. It is strategy perfected. Most people think control means constant action. They believe power must be visible, a crown, a sword, a speech. But Machiavelli knew better. Power is the ability to make others act without you lifting a finger. Silence is the test. Can you control them without sound, without force, without presence? If the answer is yes, you are feared. If the answer is no, you are forgotten. And being forgotten, Machiavelli warned, is death for rulers. Think of it like a chessboard. The amateur moves every piece, trying to show activity. The master waits. One piece sits untouched for half the game, and yet the opponent cannot move without circling around it. The silent prince is that piece. His refusal to act dominates the board. This is the secret Machiavelli grasped. The coldest power move is not to dominate the conversation, but to dominate the pauses. Not to flood the battlefield, but to choke the space with the weight of your silence. The psychology is ruthless. Human beings crave response. They cannot bear ambiguity. Silence pricks their insecurities until they confess, reveal, collapse. Every second of your stillness multiplies their fear. And fear, Machiavelli knew, is the currency of power. This is why the prince who has mastered silence holds a leash no one else can see. Consider how the same rule echoes today. In politics, the leader who pauses before answering owns the debate. In business, the negotiator who lets the offer hang forces the other side to sweeten the deal. In relationships, the one who waits to respond controls the tempo of desire. Modern rulers wear suits instead of crowns, but the principle remains unchanged. Silence is not withdrawal, it is control disguised as absence. And here lies the brutal discipline. Silence is not easy. It is agony to hold your tongue when slander spreads. It is torment to resist explaining yourself when misunderstood. It is mere impossible to refuse the human hunger for validation. But Machiavelli would tell you, the prince who cannot master this hunger is already a servant. Servant to rumor, servant to gossip, servant to his own weakness. To be feared, to be unshaken, you must embrace silence until it no longer feels like emptiness, but like a throne. The paradox is sharp. Words are cheap, silence is expensive. Every time you speak, you lower the price of your presence. Every time you withhold, you raise it. A ruler who answers every question becomes common. A ruler who answers only with silence becomes rare, and rarity breeds value. Machiavelli's lesson is clear: protect your silence like treasure. Spend it only when its release will strike deeper than steel. But there is danger. Silence can turn against you if misused. If you stay silent when decisive speech is required, you risk appearing paralyzed. If you withdraw when action is demanded, you risk losing the loyalty of your men. Silence is a weapon, not a shield. It is meant to be drawn, not clung to. Machiavelli stressed balance. The prince must know when silence terrifies and when speech commands. The art is not silence alone, but silence mastered. Now imagine this final scene. A court is restless. Enemies whisper. Allies wait. The ruler steps forward and the chamber hushes, expecting a grand decree. Instead, nothing. He holds their eyes, but not their ears. Seconds pass. A minute. The silence swells until it chokes the air. And then he turns and walks away. No order. No explanation. No plea. Only silence. And in that silence, they hear their own fears, their own suspicions, their own betrayals. They project onto him the very terror he never voiced. He becomes larger than life because his silence forces them to imagine what they cannot know. This is the Machiavellian essence. Let others torture themselves in the silence you command. So here's the law. The coldest power move is not to shout. It is not to argue. It is not to defend. It is to fall silent, to let the void itself work as your assassin, to weaponize stillness until the world bends to the pressure of its own fear. Machiavelli's silent strategy is not about retreat. It is about ruling without lifting your voice. It is about striking with nothing at all. And in the end, that is the true paradox. The one who speaks less controls more. The one who waits longer rules longer. The one who falls silent reigns. Because silence is not absence. Silence is power. And power does not beg. Power does not explain. Power walks away.